Part 66. A Sledgehammer Breaks into Pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 651. The story goes something like this. In summary, Lord Im is one of the 20 kings of the past. Wulaoxing didn't say whose family it belonged to, and Orgrim didn't ask. After all, it wasn't important. What was important was that he was still alive. And Lord Im can be said to be a very important person to the world government. He revolutionized world government. Perhaps, the original 20 kings had good intentions for this world. The construction of a world government may be for the sake of world peace and development. Although there is no evidence for this, Orgrim is willing to believe it. The original world government was not so powerful that it could suppress the entire world as it does now. It was Lord Im. At that time, he was passionate about power and completely changed the world government. It has become the behemoth it is now, integrating politics, wealth, and military. The fall of the world government also started with him. This is a man who combines light and darkness. Undoubtedly, 800 years, making him very powerful. And the control of the world government is deep-rooted. According to what the 5 old stars said, they did not even dare to guess what other methods and minions Master Yumul had within the world government besides the 5 of them. Even the CP agency is not trustworthy at all in matters like this. On the contrary, a just institution like the Navy can make them feel more at ease. Therefore, theoretically speaking, none of the forces within the world government can be used to deal with this Lord Im, right? Orgrim took a sip from the teacup and asked. The bald king nodded and said yes, that's why we want to cooperate with you. You guy, no matter how evil and how you are a pirate, but you can be sure that you will never be the power of Lord Im. Gee ha 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 ha, that's true. Orgrim laughed. This is something that the 5 old stars have finally determined by contacting and cooperating with Orgrim all the year round. But then again, in this case, I should be the one to take the lead in this matter. After all, you can't come up with any trustworthy power, so, what benefits can I get? Orgrim grinned and said with an evil smile. It's impossible to work for free. Even if there was an intention to cooperate before, we would kill Lord Im together. But this is just an intention to cooperate, 5 old men. Zingui is worried that Lord Yuma will turn against them at any time and seize their status and power. But Orgrim has no such worries. His power and status are all achieved by himself with his sword and gun. They are not given by anyone at all. Even if it's this Im, if you want to have trouble with him, you have to ask the warhammer in his hand if he agrees. The intention to cooperate is the product of mutual trust between Orgrim and the 5 old stars. But this does not mean that Orgrim will support the 5 old stars without any brains. Orgrim, we have gone through a lot of cooperation before. We understand you, and you should also understand us. This is more important, let us understand that we can get along, no matter it is order or chaos, still black and white, but, if someone else takes charge of the world government, everything you have done before will be in vain, the bald king said with a smile. You're right, we get along, of course we get along, but if we don't get along, we won't sit here drinking tea and chatting, let alone discuss such things, but I don't agree with this point of being wasted, so, stop saying such stingy things, okay, Orgrim said with a smile. Of course it works, otherwise Orgrim would not appear here. But it cannot be in vain. Orgrim has already obtained the benefits that should be obtained. Warhammer C, the pirate group, has become so powerful that it has been taken care of by the world government. For example, the previous period, when the 2 sides had a tacit agreement not to interfere with each other, was the period when the Warhammer Pirates group developed most rapidly. Aren't these all interests? Why? Can it be considered in vain? What do you want? The bearded man asked directly. Let me make it clear first, this is public, private is private, the bald king smiled and reminded. Orgrim also understood that Lord Im's matter was a private matter among the 5 old stars. Perhaps in order to resolve this private matter, they would sell some of the world government's public interests in exchange for Orgrim's cooperation. But there is definitely a limit, and they won't agree to anything that goes too far. I dare not agree. After all, this kind of nonsense is likely to cause a backlash, not only within the world government, but more likely to make Lord Im notice something is wrong. They don't dare to gamble. I understand this. Orgrim nodded. After a slight pause, Orgrim said with a smile, speaking of which, we are also a family. 5 old stars? Since when have we become a family with you, Orgrim? We are the noble 5 old stars, descendants of 20 kings. You idiot, no matter how powerful you are still not a family member to us, right? What are you surprised about? Look, isn't my sister, Khazgaroz Karanda Niemann, married to Doflamingo? Isn't Doflamingo a member of the Don Quixote family? Aren't the Don Quixote family the descendants of 20 kings? Aren't the descendants of the 20 kings the celestial dragons? Aren't I and you Tianlong people just relatives? Rounding this off, am I not also a Tianlong? Orgrim clapped his fingers and calculated the calculation for the 5 old stars. The 5 old stars were all shocked. Although they know that you, Orgrim, are shameless, this level of shamelessness is too much, right? Moreover, if we remember correctly, I have asked you about the celestial dragons before. Don't you not care at all? At this time, why are you settling this account again? Your sister, is it Khazgaro? The bald king couldn't help but ask. In his impression, there was no such thing. What you are saying is not nonsense. Can my sister still be named Edward? Orgrim said very shamelessly. However, this matter, according to the world, is very reasonable. Although Niemann is Orgrim's adopted sister, the relationship between them is very deep, and both of them have no relationship family, therefore, it is not a problem at all to use the brother's surname. That Beckman, the bearded man also asked in surprise. Khazgaro ben Beckman, any questions? Orgrim said confidently. Seeing Orgrim's shameless appearance, the 5 old stars were also helpless. This is a bad debt that cannot be settled at all. Although Orgrim's words are nonsense, but there is indeed a certain chance that it can be explained. Even if you are right, Doflamingo has been deprived of his status as a celestial dragon. You should know this very well, the bald king said. Gee ha 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 ha, getting rid of one's identity as a celestial dragon is nothing more than a trivial matter. What's important is the bloodline. Doflamingo has the blood of the Don Quixote family and the blood of the celestial dragons in his body. You can't help but admit it? Orgrim laughed. After a moment of silence, the 5 old stars nodded and said, you can admit it, so what do you want? Help Doflamingo regain his identity as a Draco. If that's the case, we can say yes. The bald king said this directly. There is no problem in restoring Doflamingo's identity. If this is the price, it will be a huge profit. Restoring Doflamingo's identity as a dragon can kill Im, isn't this a great thing? Only fools don't do this business. Are you looking down on me too much? Orgrim waved his hand and said. What do you mean? The bald king frowned slightly and said. Its restoration, my identity as a celestial dragon of the Khazgaroz family. Orgrim grinned and said with an evil smile. Impossible. The celestial dragons only have 19 families, and there has never been a Khazgarot family. What's more, don't you want your Warhammer pirates? Can you give up the Warhammer pirates? The bearded man said without hesitation. But when he said this, his expression was a little strange. After a slight pause, he said, if you can give up the Warhammer pirates, then, it doesn't seem like it's not negotiable. As soon as he finished speaking, the other 4 bosses all turned to look at the bearded man. Damn it, are you a traitor? But after thinking about it again, It seems like it's really a good deal. Huh. This is ridiculous, obviously how could you be so excited about such an incredible thing? It is impossible for me to give up and disband the Warhammer Pirates. Just give up on this idea. But think about it carefully. If this thing really comes true for our Kazgaros family, we will be the real ones. A family, darkness and light, think about it, who else can stop us from taking over this world? And, in fact, we don't need to be publicly recognized, it's enough to have such a reasonable and legal filing. This is a bridge of trust for us in the future, Orgrim said softly. Black and white can coexist now because both parties can get along, but what if they can't get along in the future? This requires a deeper relationship to solidify the trust foundation between both parties. Wulaoxing is actually quite heartwarming. But he still shook his head and said, "You are totally out of your mind, Orgrim. This kind of thing has never happened in 800 years. How do you want us to do it? The dragons on Marijoya don't know how to do it. Agree to such a ridiculous thing." Orgrim's request was indeed a bit outrageous, and even a complete joke. Where has such a thing ever happened? One or two can be operated through marriage. Adding a new Draco family is completely nonsense. Yes, Orgrim, you'd better give up on this matter and make another request. The bald king shook his head and said. This is really a pity, Orgrim said with a look of sadness on his face. But he also knew that this was a bit too much, but he was just testing it out, and it didn't take much trouble to talk about it. What if it happened? Thinking this, Orgrim asked more. Is it really impossible? Impossible, the bald king shook his head without hesitation. But at this moment, the blond man pondered for a moment and said, it is true that cooperation will benefit both parties. Yes, it is quite valuable. Orgrim said quickly. In fact, it is not impossible to operate, the blond man said softly. After hearing this, the bald king and others all turned to look at the blond man, with doubts between their eyebrows. Are you a traitor too? They ignored these looks. The man said, however, this is not a benefit that can be promised to you in the short term. Orgrim. Tell me. Orgrim was also a little surprised. I just made such an excessive request. Is it really possible? If you help us kill him, we will become the highest power and highest ranking celestial dragon in the true sense. By then, we will be able to do many things freely, the blond man said solemnly. For example? Orgrim asked. For example, cleansing Marijoya of the draconian trash, the blond man said harshly. But when he said this, the other 4-5 old stars did not show any incredulous expressions. It seems that they have already reached a consensus on this matter, right? On the contrary, Orgrim has had a lot of contact with the 5 old stars, and he naturally understands that each of these 5 old guys is very talented, and they are also truly courageous people who dare to do big things. If not, do they dare to plot with themselves here to kill Lord Im? People with such courage cannot allow the world government to continue to self-destruct like this. They will inevitably save themselves. One of the means of self-rescue is to cleanse the huge and useless parasite group inside, the celestial dragons. Find a way to deal with the worthless Tianlong people. Not to mention, just by being able to implement this matter, the ship of the world government is equivalent to a huge patch. Then what? Orgrim asked. The blond man grinned and said with a cruel smile, leave people who are obedient, sensible, and capable of doing things. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 652. In this way, we are the only ones who truly have the right to speak in the world government. At that time, your request will be much more convenient, the blond man smiled and said. To put it bluntly, he was tricking Orgrim into working for nothing. He would first draw a cake for you, and then the cake would be realized after the work was completed. But it is not enough. This is related to the legal rationality of the world government. It is one thing for us to clean up the Tianlong people. This is an internal matter for us Tianlong people. It is another thing for you to join in. Since ancient times, there have only been 2 descendants of 10 kings, or very few marriages, can be recognized as celestial dragons. Even if you use Doflamingo as an excuse or the Don Quixote family as an excuse, it's still not enough. The bald king continued without waiting for Orgrim to speak. This 5-old star who seemed to have the best relationship with Orgrim, in the end, was the one who retorted the most fiercely. Orgrim turned his head again and looked at the blond man. The blond man said with a smile, indeed, it's not enough. Just 1 Doflamingo is not enough, but you need to solve this matter yourself, Orgrim. But at this time, the bald king softened his tone and said, but Orgrim, there is another plan that is feasible. After you help us kill Lord Im, please take more care of us when we clean up the Don Quixote family. Clean up a little more, and try to help you sweep the Don Quixote family into empty shells. When the time comes, restore Doflamingo's identity as a Draco first, and then, his and Neiman's descendants, you as the descendants of the Gross family can legitimately enjoy the status of celestial dragons. After dozens or hundreds of years, we have no control over whether the Quixote family needs to change its name or something. How? Orgrim looked at these 5 old stars with a strange look. You are all a big liar. You are all talking to me here. This proposal sounds quite interesting. But who can guarantee anything? If I can solve the problem of legitimacy and legality, then when you completely grasp the sole power of the world government, even joining a Kashgro family will not be a problem, right? Orgrim ignored the bald king's suggestion, but went straight to the core of the problem. The blond man nodded directly and said, of course, after all, the difficulty of this problem lies in legitimacy and legality. To be honest, the proposal is indeed very valuable. Light and shadow truly become one. If this concept can be achieved, the Revolutionary Army and so on, it's nothing to worry about. Actually, what really makes the 5 old stars heartbeat is not the life and death of Lord Im. Even if this proposal fails, they can use other benefits to get Orgrim to nod. On this point, they 5 old stars seeing is still confident. But the problem is that they have never thought about it before, but now, after Orgrim casually made such a seemingly rude request, the prospects behind it made the 5 old stars excited. Ah! If the largest pirate force and the largest dark force in the world are secretly the same as them, they are celestial dragons, then it is equivalent to the world government changing from light to shadow, and their Draco class from black to white. Has the world firmly in its hands. Dalag's Revolutionary Army and so on, even if this kind of problem occurs in the future, it will be a small problem. For the world government and the celestial dragon class, it is a huge benefit, so great that even if the 5 old stars know that this matter is completely unreasonable and even whimsical, they will still be moved. The same is true for Orgrim. The inheritance of pirates is difficult to last. The Warhammer pirates have done a good job in this regard. As long as Andres doesn't die suddenly, he should be able to grow enough to take over the Warhammer pirates. To this end, Avalon and the Evernight Sea are working step-by-step nationalization of pirates. However, this is just a means. Orgrim has never liked putting eggs in the same basket. He is weaving this basket himself, and at the same time, he is setting his sights on the world government. In the basket. In terms of inheritance, in the past 800 years, no one can compare with the world government in terms of inheritance. How can this not make Orgrim's heart move? Even his own generation can ignore it? In fact, Orgrim Grimm personally has no interest in the identity of that rubbish Draco. But he has to admit that this identity is indeed very valuable. Andrest's generation can also ignore it, and still it doesn't make much sense. As long as he grows up well, judging from the current situation, the Warhammer pirates should not collapse within tens or hundreds of years. The same is true for Avalon and the Evernight Sea. But what about the future? This is uncertain. What is certain is that the world government will, as long as the 5 old stars kill Lord Im and start to save themselves, Orgrim will help and lend a hand, and together they will control the revolutionary army to a certain extent. Within a certain level. Let the revolutionary army turn from a scourge into a controllable knife. Then the world government will be stable. Relying on the powerful system of the world government, it will not be a big problem for another few hundred years. Orgrim, his heart is drawn to the world government, but with his current status and pride, he cannot just casually join the world government and become a little brother. What he wants to do is to enter the top class of the world government, the celestial dragons. This way. And their influence can penetrate into the world government, which is indeed a matter of mutual benefit. And this involves challenging the legal rationality and legitimacy of the world government for 800 years. It seems there is no solution. Even if Doflamingo, the Don Quixote family, is the reason, it is still difficult to solve this problem. He stretched out his hand and knocked rhythmically on the table. The thoughts in Orgrim's mind were racing. It started to spin. How can we solve the problem of legitimacy and legal rationality? For a moment, it seemed as if something was caught by him. The next second, Orgrim laughed with a glint in his eyes. Gee, ha 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 ha, I can solve this problem. The blond man is a little confused. Can he solve it? Are you afraid you're kidding? Speaking of which, I really want to thank Crocodile, he is really my lucky star, Orgrim said with a laugh. As soon as he finished speaking, he ignored the 5 old stars, took out the phone and dialed Beckman. After a while, Beckman answered the phone. Orgrim. Didn't you arrive at Marijoya? What's matter? Beckman answered the phone and asked. Orgrim smiled and said, yes, something happened. Beckman, you mentioned to me before that there is still a princess alive in the Nefertali family in Alabasta. Well, that's what happened. She has been found. In the East China Sea, Planck sent people to keep an eye on her. I think that if necessary, she can be used as a pawn in the future to deal with Crocodile and annex Alabasta, Beckman said very calmly. The 5 old stars could naturally hear Beckman's words at this moment, and they were all a little surprised. Yeah, but don't prioritize this for the time being. Find the princess and ask her to marry and dress. Make her a member of my Kazgaros family, Orgrim said directly. Beckman. What the hell are you talking about? Andre? What should Yamato do? Do you want to regret your marriage to Kaido? Beckman asked in a very serious tone. No, Yamato is the head wife, so what if my son has more wives? Orgrim said without hesitation. Beckman was silent for a moment. It really didn't seem to matter. What are you going to do? Beckman couldn't help but ask. Why did this guy start having convulsions? I want legitimacy and legal rationality. Gee, ha 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 ha, Orgrim laughed. Beckman couldn't understand what Orgrim was saying at all, but at this time, he also knew that Orgrim should be in front of the 5 old stars, and he was not suitable for some words. Talk more. Although Orgrim seems very informal on weekdays, he has always been very thoughtful on important matters and will not mess around. Out of this trust, Beckman did not ask more about these things. Instead, he asked, do we need to act now? Orgrim looked at the 5 old stars, thought for a moment and said, wait a minute, but strengthen the tracking and protection of the princess and send a cotter there. Enel, has he been fine recently? If nothing happens, let him go and secretly keep an eye on the princess. When I need her, she will have to step forward and become a member of my Kazgro family. Understood? Beckman responded softly. Without saying anything more, Beckman and Orgrim quickly hung up the phone. Then, Orgrim looked at the 5 elders with a smile of success. The stars said you just said that the Don Quixote family should change its name. I don't think it is necessary. That guy Doflamingo may not be happy with it, and I have no intention of doing so, but Nefertari, but there is only one lonely little princess left. There is no problem at all in changing the name of their family. People of our generation forget it. It has no meaning and they are not interested in being a celestial dragon. But let me ask you, who is my brother-in-law? Doflamingo of the Don Quixote family, my son, will marry the last princess of the Nefertari family among the 20 descendants of the king, Andrest. His bloodline is qualified to become a new Draco family. Orgrim's words were very powerful. The 5 old stars all looked stunned and didn't know what to say. And this operation? There is no doubt that the Nefertari family is absolutely qualified. Became Tianlong people. Moreover, they have never become Tianlong people in the past 800 years. Therefore, they have a lot of convenience in choosing to become Tianlong people. For example, in what way? The surname becomes Tianlong. Princess Nefertari Vivi is the last bloodline of the Nefertari family at this time. If she really married Orgrim's son, Andrest, and gave birth to a bloodline of the Khazgaros family. No, let alone blood, as long as she can marry Andrest, Andrest can be arranged to be a celestial dragon. After all, this is a marriage. As for the Nefertari clan's unwillingness to become Draconians, that was all 800 years ago. Now, Orgrim has the final say. He said that if you want Princess Nefertari Vivi, she must become a celestial dragon. There was no room for her to resist. That's right, in Orgrim's view, this little princess is just a tool. She only needs to use it conveniently, no matter what her will is. If she is willing to cooperate, then maybe she can find time to help her avenge her country and her family. As for Andrest, son, aren't sons just for sale? What's more, Orgrim didn't really sell him, but instead found him a fair-skinned and beautiful new wife. Isn't that nice? And what will the rest of the people think of this? Ridiculous, what does this have to do with bastards like them? When did the Tianlong people need to listen to the opinions of the bastards on matters concerning the great master of the celestial dragons? As long as the issues of legitimacy and legal rationality can be resolved, the rest is not a problem. The blonde guy was dumbfounded. I made such an outrageous request and asked you, Orgrim, to solve the problem of legitimacy and legality on your own. In the end, within 5 minutes, you really solved it? Your work efficiency is too high, right? How? There are still some flaws, but it's pretty good, right? This legitimacy and legal rationality? With the pure bloodline of 20 queens like Nefertari as the core, is it enough? Don't talk about the remaining flaws, you can't solve them, Orgrim smiled evilly. Previously, rejecting Orgrim made sense. But now, any words of rejection would seem to be a bit of shirk, and there is no real reason to hold up. The 5 old stars looked at each other, and then the bald king said, Orgrim, please wait here for a moment. This matter is too important and beyond our imagination. We need to discuss it. Please do so. Orgrim nodded with a smile. Then, the bearded man took out a remote control from his pocket and pressed it. A secret door opened in the spacious room, and then the 5 old stars rushed to Orgrim. Grim nodded and walked into the secret door one by one. They went to discuss secretly. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 653. In the secret room, the bald king lit a cigar, then frowned slightly and asked, What do you mean? Are you really ready to let Orgrim join us? Don't you feel excited about the idea he proposed? The blond man looked at the bald king and asked. The bald king sounded slightly hesitant. I have to say that the idea proposed by Orgrim is indeed too attractive. Originally, the original plan was that even if the Warhammer pirates and Orgrim couldn't be helped in the future, they could still cooperate with him and share the black and white with him. Now if it turns out to be what I just said, Wouldn't the situation be more favorable to us Tianlong people? More valuable? As Orgrim, he deserves to be on an equal footing with us, the blond man said again. But, there are still unresolved matters between the Warhammer pirates and the Navy. If such a change occurs, I'm afraid there will be a strong backlash from the Navy, the bald king said again. The bearded man nodded and said, although our control over the Navy is very stable, we cannot blindly suppress the Navy in many matters, especially the Navy led by the Warring States period, which is becoming more and more powerful. At this time, suppressing the Navy is likely to cause the Navy to decline, which is not in our interests. The opinions of the bastards are not worth mentioning. If there is really any external interference, in fact, what the 5 old stars are worried about is the Navy. This righteous master may have great opinions on this. This is what I was about to say just now. We can explain it clearly to Orgrim and agree to his request first. After we solve the problem, I'm Sama's question, then the Warhammer pirates also have to prove that they do have the power to rule the new world and rule the darkness. This proof is to defeat the Navy. If they defeat the Navy, then our behavior, naturally, the Navy had no shame to say anything, so it was considered as a matter of course to help them end it, the blond man said softly. The other 5 old stars thought about it for a while and felt that what the blond man said made sense. The battle between the Warhammer pirates and the Navy cannot be stopped at any cost, and there is no reason to stop it. If this plan is implemented, then the world government will firmly sit on the Diaotai. Regardless of whether the Navy wins or Orgrim wins, as long as this deal is reached, it will be their dragon people who win, and the world government will win. What if Orgrim is defeated? The bald king asked again. Ha 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 ha, if he loses the battle, he will naturally lose the qualification and power to talk to me on an equal footing. By then, won't it all be up to us? The blond man said with a smile. If Orgrim wins, then everyone will have a happy ending. The world government can use this as an excuse to accuse the Navy of being unable to control the new world, in order to prevent the Warhammer pirates from setting off an even crazier wave. The world government will conduct a secret recruitment process for them. This recruitment is not a type of recruitment like King Shishibukai, it will directly recruit the Kashgro family to the top level of the world government. When the time comes, even if the Navy has some opinions and ideas, as losers, they cannot have too strong a voice. Many things can only be acknowledged. And this matter can be carried out in secret. Matters related to the Tianlong people have always been, they are all kept strictly confidential. Orgrim clearly expressed that he has no interest in being a Draco, and even Andres does not have to actually become a Draco. So, for their team, roughly speaking, there are still, it takes at least more than 10 years to make adjustments. Make secret arrangements and improve them until they become a foregone conclusion and become a true family. And if Orgrim loses, the Navy will sweep across the new world. After all, even Warhammer, the pirate groups have all been defeated by the Navy, the overlord of the sea. I am afraid that in the new world, there is no force that can resist the Navy. As a result, Orgrim's value will plummet first. The same goes for its status. Threat level and other things will also drop. And even the Navy is very likely to catch him or execute him. If things come to this point, they, the 5 old stars, naturally have no need to continue to abide by the agreement. You have already finished playing, what kind of agreement do you still abide by? But just judging from this situation, the world government still does not suffer. How, when I feel like this, I even hope that the Navy will lose. Big Beard suddenly said this. As soon as Big Beard finished speaking, he found that the other 4 friends were looking at him, and there was even a sense of recognition. Yes, if the Navy wins, everything will be, it's still the same, just like it has been for hundreds of years, ups and downs. The power of the Navy has its strong periods and its weak periods. The same is true for the pirates' power, some strong and some weak. It's nothing more than that from the great pirate era, we entered a new era. It's just the great Navy age. This kind of thing has been experienced countless times in the past 800 years. The 5 old stars will not be surprised by this. But if Orgrim wins, what he created in this situation, black and white co-govern and, to a certain extent, become one. But it is an unprecedented idea and concept. The 5 old stars are looking forward to and optimistic about how this idea and concept can develop. Compared with the ups and downs of the past, this situation seems to be more in line with their wishes. In the final analysis, whether it is the Navy, pirates, or any other force, justice or evil, it doesn't matter whether they belong to it. To the celestial dragons, it doesn't matter. What matters is not justice and evil, darkness and light. What matters is whether this power belongs to them and whether it is worthy of trust. The Navy is naturally trustworthy. Orgrim has now built a certain foundation of trust with them. If he can reach the whimsical conditions and agreement just now, he will undoubtedly become more trustworthy. So, whoever wins, the world government will not lose. However, it seems that if Orgrim can win, the world government will make more money. Okay, do you have any opinions on this solution? The blond man asked. The other 5 old stars looked at each other. If this plan is really followed, when the time is right, Doflamingo will first be restored to his identity as a celestial dragon of the Don Quixote family. Then, using Doflamingo as the starting point and the Don Quixote family as the starting point, a gap was opened between the celestial dragons. Then, Orgrim's son Andrest married the last princess of the Nefertari clan. With the bloodline of the Nefertari clan, the pure descendants of the 20 kings, as the core, they officially entered the celestial dragon class. This operation can still be recognized. At the same time, before that, Orgrim had to help them kill Lord Im. After killing Lord Yumuo, they will start cleaning up the opposition and useless Dracos. Only those who are obedient, sensible, and able to do things are left. In this way, the operation difficulty of this matter will be even smaller. In the end, it depends on whether Orgrim and the Warhammer pirates can defeat the Navy. If they can, then, just follow this plan. Thinking about it, I have some expectations. After the 5 old stars all nodded, they discussed for a few more words before walking out of the secret room. As soon as he came out, he saw Orgrim standing in front of a cabinet, holding something from inside. The 5 old stars were all stunned for a moment. Then they all laughed again. Orgrim was also a little embarrassed. He shook the can of tea he had just taken out and said sheepishly, "I just want to see what you are drinking. I think the taste is pretty good. I am going to go back and buy some." He thought that the 5 old stars would have to discuss it for a while. It turned out that I only went in for a few minutes. Did they all come out? Is the matter just now so easy to decide? Ha 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 ha, this is not something you can buy on the market, it was grown by Marijoa herself, just for the 5 of us, the bearded man said with a smile. Orgrim nodded and said, "I just said that after looking at it for a long time, I didn't see any brand. If you like it, take some more back with you. I'll have someone prepare some later and send them to Avalon on time. After all, maybe we will be a family in the future, right?" Orgrim, the blond man said with a smile on his face. Orgrim's eyes lit up after hearing this, and he said with a smile on his lips, "Then I won't be polite to you. Listen to this, do you think the proposal I just made is feasible?" "It is feasible, of course it is feasible. With the Nefertari family as the core, it is indeed legitimate and legal enough. This problem has been solved, and the rest are not too difficult, but Orgrim, there is another obstacle that you need to overcome in this matter." "I don't know," the blond man said again. "Gee ha 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 ha, the Navy, right," Orgrim laughed. Just now the 5 old stars went in to discuss secretly. Orgrim naturally went through these things again in his mind. He also understood that the Navy also needs to overcome this hurdle. "That's right, Navy. The bald king nodded and said, no matter what happens, we, the Warhammer pirates, have a war to fight with the Navy. The fight is not about whether the celestial dragons are better than the celestial dragons, but to see who is the ultimate overlord on this sea. It has nothing to do with this matter. Regardless of whether you agree or not, I have to fight with the Navy, so this is not a problem. I, Orgrim, am not a messy person. This war is about our Navy. Regarding the future of Thebes and the Navy, if I win, I don't need to say anything. You can just do whatever you want. If I lose, I will accept my defeat and won't bother you, Orgrim said very grandly. The eyes of the 5 old stars also lit up. They seemed to understand why the more I looked at Orgrim recently, the more pleasing to my eyes and the more I liked him. It's because Orgrim is not so procrastinating. They are very efficient and understand their situation and thoughts very well. Very good. As long as you understand, then we can reach this agreement with you, even if it means signing and depositing money, as long as you can help us. At this point, the blond man's voice lowered instinctively, and then continued, help us kill Lord Im, and then defeat the Navy and prove ourselves, then we will solve the rest of the problems and let you Khazgross family, become a celestial dragon. No problem, it's settled. As for the signatures and pledges, forget it. There is no need to do this between us, as long as you nod, Orgrim said with a smile. There is no need to sign and pledge, as long as Orgrim can defeat the Navy and kill this mysterious Lord Im. It is impossible for the 5 old stars to go back on their word. If they go back on their word, they will. It depends on whether Orgrim agrees to it. It also depends on whether he has the courage. Originally, Orgrim was planning to discuss other conditions with the 5 old stars. This thing about the Draconians and the like was just an idea. Among them, the most excessive and the least likely to be agreed to, but the best condition. He just mentioned it casually, and did not expect the 5 old stars to let go. Although there were some twists and turns in the result, a consensus was reached in the end. This made Orgrim was a little happy. At the same time, there was no need to say any more about the rest of the conditions he had originally prepared. If he said it again, it would seem that Orgrim was a little over the top. Moreover, with the Draconians as the backbone, the rest were just side effects. There is no need to take it out and mention it, it looks petty. Very good, we have reached a consensus on the cooperation treaty, so now, let's talk about how to get rid of this stumbling block, Mr. Im, Orgrim grinned and said with an evil smile. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 654. Sitting on the sofa, Orgrim picked up the teacup and took a sip. He said, what is this, Lord Im? Are you in Marijoa now? Orgrim knew very little about Lord Im's intelligence information. He just knew that there was such a person. The rest was what the 5 old stars had just told him. Therefore, he didn't have much plan on how to kill Lord Im. But the simplest and crudest method is to directly find Lord Im, knock on the door, and kill him by force with your strong personal strength. If Im Sama is in Marijoa at this time, maybe you can use this method directly. But this should cause great damage to Marijoa. But this problem, for now, is not a problem for Orgrim. He is not a Draco yet, and he will not even be in the future. Why does he care so much? Not here. The bald king shook his head and said. As we just said, Lord Im's whereabouts are very secretive and it will be difficult for us to find him. No, it should be said, there is no way to find him at all. He only returns to Marijoa at certain times, e.g., during the World Conference. The blond man also said. Yes, but Lord Im has not come back and appeared in the recent World Conferences. As we said before, his interest in the world government seems to be declining. We don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but we can only prepare for the worst. The bearded man nodded and said. No pictures of him or anything. So I can go back and arrange for the intelligence department of the Warhammer pirates to search for it. Orgrim touched his chin and said. Since Master Im is not in Marijoa, we can't just go up and kill him. We have to find him first. No, since Lord Im's death, all the photos, portraits, and related information about him have been destroyed. I think it was probably him who did it himself. After that, Lord Im moved behind the scenes. He will never let any photos of himself be passed down. The five of us may seem noble, but in front of him, we are just five obedient watchdogs. How can we be qualified to leave photos for him? Every time I see him, speaking of this, the blond man had a look of embarrassment in his eyes. As the highest power of the world government, the apparent ruler. Every time you go to see Lord Im, you have to kneel down in front of him like a domestic dog and obey him obediently. For the proud five old stars, this is simply the greatest humiliation. So, there is no photo, no information, and he is not in Marijo, so we can't find him at all. It sounds like you're asking me to kill someone who doesn't exist. By the way, for most people, he does not exist. Ha 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 ha. Orgrim laughed. This made the five old stars a little embarrassed. After smiling a little, the bald king said, so, what we mean is, what kind of bait should be used to catch Lord Im? Just come out. Orgrim nodded, and then asked, what are you going to use as bait? Things that can arouse Im Sama's interest. To put it simply, it is a major event, the bald king said solemnly. Although I won't be involved in anything, occasionally, when something important happens, Im Sama will contact us and ask about it. This is an opportunity, the bearded man said. A look of understanding appeared in Orgrim's eyes, and then he asked, so, what major event are you planning to use? As soon as he finished speaking, the five old stars all looked at him. Orgrim was a little confused. What do you want me to do? Orgrim frowned and said. When it comes to the ability to make trouble, there is no one in the world today who is more capable of making trouble than you, Orgrim. At the same time, Lord Yim has indeed paid a lot of attention and interest to you. Your war with Whitebeard, he once called me and asked about it, Orgrim. It still depends on how you arrange this matter, the blond man said with a smile on his face. Hey, this is different from what I imagined. I thought that you would arrange everything, and I just need to help you kill him. That's enough. Why now, do you think you are going to ask me to arrange the whole process? Orgrim said with some dissatisfaction. No, as you said, we can cooperate with you, the bald king said with a smile. Orgrim was silent for a moment, and then continued, we, the Warhammer pirates, have no intention of causing trouble recently. In fact, you must also consider carefully, any major incident, what will happen in the end. The impact may cause the current situation to collapse and new changes to occur. Orgrim, we are not in imminent danger, Lord Im's matter, we have the patience to wait, but we cannot wait too long, otherwise changes will happen. You may be able to give us an accurate word. If you want to cause changes, Warhammer pirates, how long do you need to prepare? The blond man asked. Orgrim glanced at the sky. To be honest, telling this matter is a bit risky. After all, if these guys turn around and tell the Navy, then the Navy will. Doesn't he have the initiative? But after thinking about it for a while, Orgrim thought about it. This matter can also be viewed from two sides, and the five old stars may not make a fuss about him. At least after killing him before Lord Im, the five old stars would definitely side with him. After a smile, Orgrim said, about 2 to 3 years, can you afford to wait? 2 to 3 years, the blond man looked a little hesitant. The bald king said in a deep voice, no. Cannot wait. As soon as he finished speaking, the other five old stars no longer hesitated, nodded, and said, we can wait, and then use the Navy's war with you as an opportunity. How? Orgrim grinned, nodded with a smile and said, okay. No matter what, Orgrim had to take the war with the Navy seriously and pay attention to it. How could it be possible at this time to abandon the navy and go find trouble with Lord Im? What if he kills Im Sama and the Warhammer pirates are defeated? What do you say? Could it be that he worked for nothing for the 5 old stars? Want to rob me of Orgrim's power for free? But he still agreed. After all, the 5 old stars didn't know it at this time, and the navy might not have thought of it. In the next round of war, Orgrim plans to use the Whitebeard pirates as the vanguard. Again, this war is not a war between Orgrim and the navy. It is a war between the entire pirate camp and the navy. The decisive factor is the era of pirates or the era of the navy. It depends on whether this era of great pirates can continue. How is it possible that I, Orgrim, am the only one who shines? If the plan goes well, the Whitebeard pirates will be the vanguard and the first to provoke a war with the navy headquarters. During this period, Lord Im will most likely appear. During this period, Orgrim still has time to catch Lord Im and hammer him to death. But there is no need to elaborate on these things with the 5 old stars. As soon as Orgrim said this, the 5 old stars also had a touch of joy on their faces. They didn't expect Orgrim to be so grand. After all, the request just mentioned is a bit too much. When the Warhammer pirates are dealing with the navy and the war begins, let Orgrim take the time to help them deal with Lord Im. This is indeed somewhat inappropriate. Therefore, when they proposed this idea, they were prepared to be rejected by Orgrim. I just didn't expect Orgrim to be so interesting. This is really, Orgrim, thank you very much, the blonde man said very sincerely. Gee ha 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 ha, there is no need to be polite. You should also know that I, Orgrim, have always been generous to my own people. From my point of view, we are already a family in the future, so if I help you, I will help me. Isn't it? I don't want to wait until the future to join you and have some IMM sitting on my head. Gee, just thinking about it makes people angry. Orgrim laughed and said. Seeing what Orgrim said, the 5 old stars also had a better view of him. The blonde man looked at each other for a while with the other people, and then looked at Orgrim. Grim said, in this case, we should also show some expression. If you need it, we can give it to the navy. But before he even finished speaking, Orgrim waved his hands and said with a straight face, I don't have any moral integrity. When a war is fought, I will do whatever it takes, but not this time. In this showdown between our thieves and the navy, on other levels, we can use despicable methods, but on this level, we cannot. If we want to fight, we must really distinguish ourselves. Perhaps, taking this as an opportunity to ask the 5 old stars to secretly torture the navy, Orgrim will have a greater chance of winning this war. But Orgrim is unwilling to do this. This war is he has been feuding with the navy for many years, and he wants to put an end to the war. A war to decide who is the overlord of the sea. Since he wants to be the overlord, he must use hard power and win with dignity. This can be regarded as his willfulness. It can also be regarded as his pride. In short, he is not willing to despicably let the 5 old stars weaken the power of the navy in this matter. He cannot afford to lose face. Look at Orgrim speaking so firmly, the 5 old stars actually felt a little embarrassed. That's good. Bihai can leave you an enclave. We also know that, you should be in Bihai, you still have things to do, right? The bearded man said after thinking for a while. Orgrim grinned and said, aren't you afraid that Germa will cause trouble again? Ha 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 ha, Germa's dark business has been divested into your dark group. In terms of threat, it has also been reduced a lot. The most important thing is that we are optimistic about you, Orgrim. When all the dust has settled, you and we are one and the same. When the time comes, you won't let Germa run wild in the North Sea, right? After all, the loss is also your benefit. In this case, what do we have to worry about? The blonde man laughed and said. Orgrim nodded and said, I will accept your kindness. You're welcome. After all, We are close partners now, the bald king said with a smile. Based on the specific situation and changes at that time, we will discuss the next step. That's it for today. We are quite satisfied with this kind of progress. This means that we are sincere. And also trust each other, and hope this can continue in the future. The blond man smiled and said. The basic purpose of today's meeting has been achieved. Orgrim got the agreement he wanted. The 5 old stars were also sure that Orgrim would take action. However, things after that need to be arranged according to changes in the situation. Now there is no trace of Master Im, and there is nothing to talk about. It's time to call it a day. Orgrim nodded first, and then seemed to have thought of something. He grinned and said, by the way, Jun, if you can, please help me take more care of her. As soon as Orgrim finished speaking, the 5 old stars were a little surprised. If I remember correctly, didn't you have an extremely bad relationship with that Jun? But looking at Orgrim's sneaky smile, the 5 old stars seemed to understand something. Easy to say, these are all small things, the 5 old stars said with a smile. It's time for dinner, shall we have a meal together? The bearded man invited. Gee ha 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 ha, of course there is no problem, but I miss the food here very much, Orgrim laughed and responded. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 655. I didn't say much, after all, everyone was busy. After finishing the meal and chatting together for a while, Orgrim took his leave. After the 5 old stars made a symbolic attempt to persuade him to stay, they packed a lot of tea leaves for Orgrim and happily sent Orgrim away. Not even a day has passed, and what needs to be said has already been said. And it is a very important matter, even related to the overall situation of the future world. This news must not be made public. Durag, ha ha ha, I wonder how you will feel when you find out in the future that I actually wear a pair of pants with the world government. I'm really looking forward to your expression. Orgrim stood on the deck of the Jun warship, looking at the Marijoy port that was gradually leaving, and thought with some joy. If he hadn't appeared, the 5 old stars would have been unable to find anyone they could trust and have the ability to kill Lord Im. In that case, they will definitely continue to stay under Lord Im's hands. Judging from Lord Im's current attitude, it would be more troublesome for the world government to save itself. It is even less possible to clean up any Tianlong people. Then, it is really possible for Durag's revolutionary army to succeed. But now, if Durag knew these secrets, he would probably be so angry that he would vomit blood. It seems that you had a pleasant conversation. Jun walked to Orgrim's side and asked. Gee ha 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 ha, quite enjoyable. Orgrim said with a smile. Jun nodded slightly. Although there was curiosity in his eyes, he did not ask anything. Are you curious? Orgrim said with an evil smile on his lips. Of course, but I know very well that you will not tell me what you said to the 5 old stars. Jun nodded calmly and said. Gee ha 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 ha, not necessarily. I told Wulaoxing to ask them to take more care of you in the navy, Orgrim said with a laugh. Jun looked at Orgrim in surprise. Orgrim was thinking about another thing. In the original story, after the General Marshal of the Warring States period retired, the new Marshal of the Navy was Sakaski. For this reason, Kuzan also had a fight with Sakaski, but was ultimately defeated and left the Navy. Orgrim didn't know whether his departure from the Navy was true or not. Maybe Kuzan left the Navy, or maybe he took the opportunity to carry out some secret mission. But in general, Kuzan should not be a person who changes his beliefs easily. No matter where he is, he must be righteous. As for Kuzan and Sakaski, they couldn't argue with each other, and finally they had to fight in a duel to decide who should be the marshal. One big factor is that the two are evenly matched. People like the Warring States Marshal and Garp must ultimately choose to support Kuzan in this matter. Not to mention the Warring States period, in the story, when he reported to the cyborg boss, he already made it clear that he supported Kuzan. Garp, even if he supports Porosalino, he cannot support Sakaski, who beat Ace to death. Therefore, the general trend within the navy at that time was biased towards Kuzan, a dovish navy. Originally, judging from this situation, Sakaski was not qualified to compete with Kuzan for the position of marshal. However, Sakaski has strong support from higher levels. That is the world government, the 5 old stars. Compared with Kuzan, the wavering admiral, the 5 old stars obviously appreciate Sakaski, a firm admiral, more. Therefore, Wulaoxing strongly intervened in the naval martial battle between Sakaski and Kuzan. Let Sakaski, who was originally at a disadvantage, be no less supportive than Kuzan. In the end, the situation in the navy was at a stalemate, and then Sakaski and Kuzan decided to use a duel to determine the position of navy marshal. In this ending, Sakaski naturally won and sat on the throne of marshal. But now, Orgrim didn't know what effect his final instructions to 5 old stars would have. But if there is a choice, maybe the 5 old stars will recommend Jun? Invisibly, Sakaski was tricked. But who told Jun to have a closer relationship with him? In other respects, Orgrim had nothing to give Jun and had nothing to give Jun. Maybe, I can only help her a little bit with this kind of trivial matter. This woman vowed to herself that she would become a general and a marshal. As a man, how could he not help? As for her becoming a general or a marshal, will it have any adverse effects on herself? Maybe, but it is estimated that by that time, the agreement between him and the 5 old stars will have been reached. Even if Jun becomes the marshal of the navy, can he still attack the Tianlong people? When the time comes, what kind of tangled expression will she have? Orgrim is also looking forward to it. I have some things to do, so I'll be with you later. Orgrim smiled at Jun, turned around and left. Only then did Jun come back to his senses. Orgrim, this pirate, should Wulaoxing pay more attention to her navy? World, when did it become so fantastic? At the same time, at Naval Headquarters Marineford, the Warring States Marshal is also answering calls from Marijoa, the 5 old stars. Yes, I understand, Marshal Warring States replied to the phone bug. In short, don't let your talents be buried. Jun has proven its ability by being able to capture Charlotte Lingling. If you have the opportunity, support her more. Wulaoxing gave another instruction, and then hung up the phone. Looking at the hung up phone bug in his hand, Marshal Warring States looked a little strange. Support Jun more. Jun has already reached the position of candidate for general, how can he support him? Nowadays, if nothing happens, we can't add another admiral position, right? This is not in line with tradition. Increase salary, Marshal Warring States murmured something funny. But soon, he began to think again. Why did the 5 old stars tell him such things at this time? When I thought about it, Orgrim should have just ended with the 5 old stars meeting. I thought about the relationship between Jun and Orgrim again, complex relationships. Marshal Warring States somewhat understood. After understanding the factors behind this, he felt even more miserable. What exactly did Orgrim talk about with the 5 old stars? Now, can his influence penetrate into the navy? Why is this so nonsense? A great pirate was able to ask someone to take care of the navy headquarters candidate for general. What's even more ridiculous is that the request is still from Wulaoxing. As a naval marshal, he simply can't refuse. All of a sudden, Marshal Sengoku was very upset. Who is I, Sengoku, the marshal, or are you, Orgrim, the marshal? Can't you just be your pirate? Why do you mind our navy's business? However, the Warring States Marshal did not doubt Jun because of this. Over the years, his trust in Jun remained unshakable. If Jun really had something wrong in his heart, he wouldn't be able to act so generously. But, even if things are so ridiculous, regardless of standpoint, I have to admire Jun's vision. I really found a good man for myself, Marshal Sengoku muttered softly. Is this considered Jun's embrace? In the warship, in Jun's cabin, Orgrim was sitting on the sofa, holding a phone in his hand, and dialed go out. I didn't doubt whether there would be any eavesdropping device here. Just kidding, this warship is the vehicle of Jun, and Jun is the boss on the warship. I have seen any boss install a eavesdropping device in his house when he has nothing to do. Isn't that sick? Soon, the phone bug was picked up. Hey, I haven't contacted you for a long time. Do you want to complain that I didn't go to Golden City? Doflamingo's laughter came from the phone bug. Gee ha 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 ha, you still have the nerve to say it, haven't you already gone out? Why didn't you come in the end? It's a shame that I waited for you in Golden City for so long. Could it be that Neiman went to be high and you just did something? Is it a sneaky thing? Orgrim asked with a big smile. I also had some issues here that needed to be resolved, so I turned around halfway. As for the Golden City matter, I didn't go, but it opened smoothly, didn't it? It doesn't matter at all. As for Mr. Hammer, are you waiting for me or some beautiful female navy? Tisk tisk, do you still need me to point it out? Doflamingo teased with a smile. Orgrim was stunned for a moment, and then laughed and scolded. You guys, can you pay more attention to business when you have nothing to do? You keep an eye on my private life every day. Is this interesting? Of course it's interesting. Your Mr. Chewy's gossip is the most interesting gossip. Phew. Doflamingo laughed and said. I really can't stand you. Orgrim couldn't help but shook his head and said. So, do you have anything to say? Doflamingo changed the subject and asked. I just met with the 5 old stars, Orgrim said softly. Of course I have heard about this matter. It seems that you have discussed some matters related to me. Doflamingo is very smart. After thinking of something, he asked. That's right, speaking of which, I have never asked you, what are your feelings and opinions about the 5 old stars? Disgust. Hate it? Orgrim asked. No, there are no senses or opinions, Doflamingo said calmly. Gee ha 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 ha, I thought you hated them all, the celestial dragons. Orgrim laughed. It was like this when I was a child, but now, I know very well that those things back then were trivial and not even qualified to be in the eyes of the 5 old stars. Therefore, they have nothing to do with them. What I hate is Marijoa, that Don Quixote, the Tianlong people of the Da family, and those trashes like them, Doflamingo said with a somewhat cold tone. Ha ha ha, that's it? I have some news for you. After this, we'll seeing. Well, in about 3 or 2 years, there will be a big purge of the Don Quixote family and other families, and those trash will be purged. Orgrim said with a smile. Oh? That's really courageous, I didn't expect it, Doflamingo said with a hint of surprise in his eyes. I will pay special attention to your Don Quixote family, but what I want to ask is, are you interested in being a celestial dragon again? Orgrim asked with an evil smile on his lips. Doflamingo was stunned for a moment and said, this kind of thing is no joke. Do you think I'm the kind of person who's bored enough to make a joke about something like this? Orgrim said softly. You mean, Doflamingo felt a little hot in his heart. He hates and loathes those superior celestial dragons. The fundamental reason is because of jealousy. He is obviously equally noble, so why do he have to wallow in this quagmire, while those losers who are not as good as him can be so superior? Previously, Doflamingo's thought was to pull down all the trash and let them have a taste of the mud. Now, listening to Orgrim's words, it seems that not only can he deal with those bastard celestial dragons, but he may even be able to regain his identity as a celestial dragon? Is there such a good thing? I have reached some agreements with Wulaoxing, the details are as follows, Orgrim softly told the story just now. Doflamingo was at the phone bug, and everyone was dumbfounded. How the hell can you still do this? He hadn't even thought about it. Mr. Hammer, I have to write you a word of service, Doflamingo finally said in disbelief. Gee ha 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 ha, basic skills, no 6. Orgrim laughed. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 656. After talking about these things, Doflamingo felt a little excited. I didn't follow Mr. Chewy wrong back then. I originally thought that it would be good to follow Mr. Chewy in this life and teach the celestial dragons on Marijoya a lesson. Even in recent years, even this obsession has dissipated a lot. If we really want to talk about hatred, there is not much hatred. But looking at it now, not only can I take revenge on those bastard celestial dragons, but I can even become a celestial dragon again. I feel happy just thinking about it. Sure enough, you still didn't follow the wrong person. Anyway, thank you very much, Master Chewy, Doflamingo said with a smile. We are a real family. No matter how much you say thank you or not, if I help you, you are also helping me. Orgrim smiled and said. After a slight pause, he continued, there is something that you should pay more attention to. What's up? Sounds important, Doflamingo raised his brows slightly and asked. It's very important. Help me find a devil fruit, the natural type dark fruit. I must find this fruit, the sooner the better. Orgrim said in a deep voice. Natural type dark fruit? Doflamingo was a little surprised, and then, as if he had thought of something, he asked, are you planning to arrange it for Andre? Listening to the name, it seems to be related to the power of darkness. It suits him very well. The son of darkness, Fufufu. Orgrim was also stunned for a moment, it felt really good. But soon, he shook his head and said no, that's not the case. This is about the start of the next war and my plan. As for that boy Andre, let him look at himself first and don't consider this. If there is a chance and room for things, look at it again. About the next long war, a war between the Navy and us pirates, Doflamingo also asked a little more seriously. Yes, this devil fruit will become the trigger of war. Orgrim said without hesitation. This is really, it's so important, a bit beyond my expectation. Doflamingo murmured, and then he said okay, I will arrange people to do my best to find this devil fruit, and I will get it as soon as possible. Although he had some doubts in his heart, how special could this devil fruit be? Why was it enough to start a war? But Doflamingo didn't ask any more questions. Since Orgrim said this, he must have a reason. He is not someone who would make fun of something like this. Well, I'll leave it to you. After all, you are a professional in this area, Orgrim said with a smile. Now that Ace has come to his side, naturally he can't expect the original story to unfold smoothly. After the previous war, their Warhammer pirates took down the Whitebeard pirates. It was not for nothing that the group's territory was squeezed to the forefront of the battle between the New World and the Navy. Orgrim planned to use the Whitebeard pirates to start this war between the Navy and the pirates. The most powerful force ever. The strong man Edward Newgate was the vanguard he used to defeat the Navy in one fell swoop, drive it completely out of the New World, and crush their plans. Want to move the Navy headquarters to the New World? Just dream. Speaking of the Navy headquarters, now, all the territories your Navy captured in the last war have to be vomited out. At most, an organization similar to G-5 is enough. This is also the limit that Orgrim can tolerate. After all, it is impossible to prevent the Navy from entering the New World. That is too extreme, and the Navy cannot give up. It would be good to maintain the situation before this war. A Navy that is independent from its headquarters, living in the New World is a state that everyone can accept. But in the New World, there can only be one voice, and that is the voice of the Warhammer pirates, the voice of pirates. The new world is a new world for pirates. On this point, we must not give in, and we must not let the Navy relocate their naval headquarters to the new world. In one fell swoop, defeat the power of the Navy in Marineford. But, as mentioned before, the Navy wants to move its naval headquarters to the New World. Starting a war with the pirates is very disadvantageous, because even if they have set foot in the New World now, the pirates still have the final say in the New World. Similarly, if Orgrim wants to enter the New World, it is risky, it is also very big. Therefore, it is impossible for him to directly lead the Warhammer pirates to go wild, and there is something wrong with his brain. If he wraps up the Whitebeard pirates and lets them be the vanguard, and then the Warhammer pirates follow, the risk will be huge. It has been reduced a lot. Perhaps, Crocodile will be fooled again by then. In short, this cannot allow the Warhammer pirates to succeed alone. This is a matter for the entire pirate camp. I don't care about the little ones, but the big guys have to do their best. Whoever doesn't contribute will be eliminated by Orgrim first, to avoid being taken advantage of in the end. But Newgate was not a fool. It was impossible for Orgrim to tell him to fight Marine Headquarters Marineford, and Newgate would start the war without saying a word. With his current state of mind, he probably wouldn't care about this at all. Therefore, there must be a reason for a war between him and the Navy. For this reason, in the original story, Ace was captured, and Newgate would not let the Navy execute Ace so casually, so he started the war on top. Now, there is no reason anymore. Orgrim had to come up with a reason. The key point is that Marshal D. Teach is such an ambitious person. The dark fruit is the key to leveraging Tikai's chess piece. Once you master the dark fruit, you will have the key to intervene in the internal problems of the Whitebeard pirates. Orgrim didn't need to think about how to operate specifically. He only needed to seize Tiki's lifeline and ask Tiki to complete the goals he gave. With dark fruit, for trading chips. Presumably, that bastard Teach will be moved. Apart from anything else, Teach is definitely a very capable person. In the original story, he was the biggest winner in the battle on top. The two major camps of the Navy and pirates are at the palm of your hand. So Orgrim still trusts this guy's ability. Give him the goal and let him think about how to achieve it. After completing it, Orgrim will give him the fruit of darkness. It's that simple. As for whether to deal with Teach in the end, it depends on how the plan unfolds, and also depends on Orgrim's mood. After hanging up the phone with Doflamingo, Orgrim had a smile on his lips. Doflamingo has always been very resourceful and capable when it comes to finding devil fruits. It can be said that in the dark world, 80 or 90% of the circulation of devil fruit business is at the hands of Doflamingo. This channel can also extend his influence. So Orgrim still believes that Doflamingo's ability can find the dark fruit. It's nothing more than giving him some time. After saying this, Orgrim stood up, opened the cabin door, and said as he walked, "Jun, is it time to eat?" After a while, Jun appeared at the end of the corridor. He frowned and said, "Didn't you just have dinner with the 5 old stars? No matter how good their food is, it's not as good as yours," Orgrim said with a smile. Jun also had a smile on his face and said, "Then just wait." At the same time, at the port of Avalon, Enelu held up a photo of a girl with a confused look on his face. Gangplank was talking to him, while Lucci looked at Enel enviously. The girl in this photo is called Nefertali Weiwei. She is a distressed princess of the previous royal family of Alabasta. She is now in the East China Sea. The relevant information is here. As Plank spoke, he handed a piece of information contained in a document bag to Enel, and then continued, "This last princess of Alabasta is very important to us." "How important is it?" Enelu asked a little strangely. Gangplank scratched his head and said, "I don't know the specific situation, but this is something that Mr. Chui personally told Mr. Er. In this way, you should understand. Is it something that Lord Orgrim personally explained? Anilu had a hint of surprise in his eyes, then nodded seriously and said, I understand. When you go to the East China Sea, you need to find this princess first. You don't need to do anything else. Just keep an eye on her and protect her. We can't let others take her away, especially the people from Crocodile. Gangplank explained in a deep voice. Enel nodded strangely and asked, so, why don't you just capture her and bring her to Avalon? I heard it. Gangplank muttered in a low voice, and then said furtively, it is said that Mr. Hammer wants His Highness to marry this princess. An arrow. What's the point? Anilu asked in surprise. How do I know what the meaning is? Anyway, this is what Master Hammer explained. He rarely takes care of such things, but every time he takes care of it, it has an important impact on our Warhammer pirates. Last time, it formed the foundation of our Warhammer pirates and the Sea of Beasts. The hardcore alliance between thieves, this time, although I don't know the reason yet, it must be important. Gangplank touched his chin and said. Aniro nodded and didn't ask any more questions. Gangplank then continued, anyway, it seems that this little princess will be used as a wife for His Highness in the future. Some things are very important to our Warhammer pirates, so the second master's intention is, on the one hand, to let her, the princess of the subjugated country, experience the sufferings of the world and temper her temper to avoid being too arrogant. On the other hand, it is not suitable to use too strong methods, so keep an eye on it first. It is best to be subtle, and use it immediately when necessary. I see. Anilu nodded again and said. Anyway, I leave it to you. Gangplank smiled and said. At this time, Lucci said with envy, Brother Anilu, Lord Orgrim really trusts you. Such important things must be left to you. I was in a miserable state, and there was an oil bottle next to me. Isn't Ace making great progress? Anilu asked with a smile. Well, in short, Mr. Beckman did not allow me to leave Avalon until I taught him well. What a terrible thing you think this is, Lucci said helplessly. After I go there, I may not be able to leave the East China Sea in a short period of time. It is also very restricted, so don't say these words and just do your work, Anilu said with a smile. Well, in short, I wish you a safe journey, Brother Anilu. Lucci nodded first, and then blessed. Ha 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 ha, don't worry, this is not a dangerous mission, Anilu laughed. Soon, Anilu's ship left the port of Avalon and headed towards the East China Sea. Come on, you boy, go back and take care of your apprentice. Glank reached out and patted Lucci, laughing and joking. Well, it's hard to imagine how Brother Enel felt when he took me with him. Lucci shook his head and said with some emotion. Ha 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 ha, you kid still knows how to think about these questions now. There is progress, Plank laughed and joked. Dear gentlemen, since last month, the flowers have not kept up with me. However, under normal circumstances, I have been updating the 5th update with flowers. In fact, I have used leave, monthly tickets, and rewards. I am making up for what I owe according to calculations. It will be made up today. Thank you all for your continued support here. I am asking for a wave of flowers and monthly tickets today. I'll stop for now. I'll see the big guys tomorrow. Thank you. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 657. The sky in the Evernight Sea is always dark. However, people who have lived here for a long time have already figured out their own way of distinguishing day and night. Queen Stussy, who was originally sleeping, opened her eyes very naturally after reaching a certain point. She reached out and touched the edge of the bed, where there was still some residual warmth. Of course, this is not the temperature left by Orgrim. After all, Orgrim has not returned yet. It's Hancock, and these two women sleep together when Orgrim is away. Already up? More positive than me, her lady queen smiled and said to herself. But that's right, after all, Orgrim is coming back today, and it's normal for Hancock to be a little excited. Isn't she the same? After all, under normal circumstances, if nothing happens, Queen Stussy will sleep until noon before waking up. For her, getting enough sleep is one of the secrets to her youthful appearance. I sat up from the bed, got dressed, and went to wash up. Queen Stussy opened her bedroom door and walked out. As soon as he arrived in the living room, he saw Hancock juicing cut fruits very skillfully and humming some song. One look at it and you can tell she's in a good mood. "Sister Stussy, are you up?" After Hancock heard the movement behind him, he turned around and smiled. "Well, you got up so early, Hancock." Queen Stussy also smiled and said, "Well, today is the day when Orgrim is coming back. I guess he is almost here, right? I don't know if he was targeted on the Navy warship. I want to prepare some delicious food for him to relieve the fatigue of the journey," Hancock said happily. "I think he must have eaten well and slept well." "Well played." The Queen curled her lips and said. Hancock nodded thoughtfully, and then immediately said, "Then I need to be more prepared. My mother-in-law told me that if you want to capture a man's heart, you must first capture it. A man's stomach can't let that female marine fascinate Orgrim." Stussy felt like she had been hit 10,000 times. She grabbed the man's stomach. "Over the years, not only have I failed to catch it, but I have almost destroyed the stomach. It's really amazing. How can I improve my cooking skills?" Queen Stussy said helplessly. However, she didn't really hope to get any answers. It's not like Hancock hadn't taught her carefully before. It's nothing more than familiarity. Just do more and practice more. Facts have proved, sure enough, cooking depends on talent, and her talent, Stussy, is all about dark cuisine. Even Hancock has given up. After a pause, "Stussy," he said, "but Orgrim will never be fascinated, that guy, very hard-hearted." Queen Stussy has personal experience of this matter. Back then, when she had a special status, Orgrim was like this. He might enjoy the pleasures of fish and water, or he might be very considerate. But when it comes to actually making a choice, women have never been a factor that affects him. That guy, just don't mention it. After helping Hancock and doing some busy work, Her Majesty the Queen opened the door of the house and walked towards the yard. It was time to prune her little darlings, what Orgrim called the weeds. But as soon as they opened the door, Stussy saw Lucci teaching Ace in the yard, seemingly channeling his domineering power. This made Her Majesty the Queen a little surprised. Why did Lucci come here to teach Ace today? When he was a child, Lucci lived directly in the huge courtyard of Orgrim. After all, the courtyard was big enough and there were many houses. Anilu and Lucky all lived here at that time. Later, when the two guys grew up, they were kicked out and lived on their own. But Robin and Yamato still live here. Not long ago, this kid Peggywan was also kicked out. But Runty still stayed here. It's been a while since I've seen Lucci doing morning exercises here, let alone teaching Ace. Before the Queen could ask questions, the door to Robin's room also opened. Then, Robin appeared there lazily, wearing a set of sky blue spotted pajamas, which was so cute. She stretched out her hand to push up the flat glasses on the bridge of her nose, and asked a little strangely, "Lucci, why are you here?" "Oh, Robin, you are getting lazy. When we were all here, didn't you get up early and read a book? After we left, you started to be lazy." Lucci turned around and smiled after hearing Robin's voice. Robin smoothed his long black hair, yawned slightly, and said lazily, "I was a little late reading last night." Hum, today is the day when Lord Orgrim comes back. I have to show off here. Ace, show them." Lucci crossed his arms in front of his chest and said a little bit. Ace nodded to Robin sheepishly, and then quickly said, "What are you looking at?" Domineering. Haven't you mastered it?" Lucci quickly reminded. "Master, Ace was a little embarrassed, and then said, "Isn't it too embarrassing? Just a trace of..." As he spoke, Ace raised his arm and squeezed his fist violently. A vague aura emerged from his fist. It looks very ethereal, and may even disappear at any time. But there is no doubt that this is domineering, armed domineering. There was a hint of surprise in Robin's eyes. If he remembered correctly, Ace had only been here not long ago, right? Even when he first came here, he was absolutely a blank slate, with some messy personal combat experience and a bit of strength, but almost nothing else. Apart from having a domineering personality, he has nothing else. As someone who has also practiced and mastered Haki, Robin naturally knows how difficult Haki is to master. So far, she has not mastered the second stage. On the contrary, friends like Lucci, who are extremely powerful in terms of fighting talents, have become great masters. "So fast," Queen Stussy also said with some surprise at this time. As soon as her voice fell, Lucci and others noticed that the Queen had also come out. "Lord Stussy," Lucci quickly said hello to Stussy. "Lucci, his teaching was good, how could he let Ace awaken the power of domineering so quickly?" Stussy nodded with satisfaction and said, "It has nothing to do with my teachings. Although I am also very responsible, this boy Ace is really talented. He feels like he is about to catch up with me," Lucci said with a smile. Ace said with some embarrassment, "Lucci, stop bragging, my domineering power is just a wisp, it's not enough, it's completely meaningless." But before Lucci could speak, Robin said with a smile, "Everything is difficult at the beginning. The most difficult stage of domineering power lies in awakening this potential power. After awakening, it will be much easier, and in a very short period of time, rapid progress was made until you reach the bottleneck. After that, domineering is just a matter of time and effort. You have to practice hard day after day. Those who are qualified can master the new stage of domineering. Those who are not qualified can master the new stage of domineering, but it's difficult," Queen Stussy added with a smile. "From the current point of view, Ace is very qualified, and I think he can also master the second stage of domineering," Lucci said confidently. After chatting for a while, Hancock walked out of the room. "Sister Stussy, there is news. The port said that the G-5 warship has appeared in the sea. Orgrim is coming back. Let's go to the port," Hancock said happily. Queen Stussy nodded with a smile, and then said to everyone, "Let's go together." After Robin heard this, he immediately said, "Wait for me a moment, I'll go change clothes." Lucci hesitated for a moment, then shook his head and said, "No, no, I won't go. I will work hard here. Lord Orgrim will be able to see me when he comes back, and he will definitely praise me. Ace, do your best." The Queen smiled. Lucci is obviously not young anymore, but the problem every time he is in Orgrim is that he always becomes like a child. After a while, Robin walked out of the house, followed Hancock and Queen Stussy, left the courtyard, and walked towards the port. At the same time, on the G-5 warship, Orgrim also just sat up from the bed. He looked at the empty bed next to him in surprise before he could react. The door to the bathroom opened. He was wearing only a white shirt. The charming Jun held a towel in his hand and walked out of it while wiping his neck. Why did you get up so early today?" Orgrim asked with some surprise. He and Jun were drifting on the sea and living in the same room for so long. Of course, Orgrim also understood Jun's habits. She was also a guy who liked to sleep in. Before, every time, he, Orgrim, got up first and heated a cup of fresh milk. After waiting for a while, this lazy woman would open her eyes. "Why, did you get up so early today?" Putting down the towel in his hand, Jun said with a smile, "We'll be in Avalon soon, so get up and pack up and get out." After saying that, He also threw all of Orgrim's randomly thrown clothes from the sofa on the bed. Orgrim looked at Jun helplessly and said, "You are really a ruthless person, woman." But he didn't really complain. He picked up his pants and asked while putting them on, "Do you want to go to the island with me? How many days will you stay?" "No, I don't want to get into a fight with CP-0's former top agent." Jun waved her hands without hesitation. She also knew that Stussy would never tolerate her. Orgrim is outside, out of sight of her, so forget it. If she dares to go to Ava, show off your power, Stussy will never bear it down. No, that's not the case with Stussy. Orgrim wants to make a few excuses. "You promise?" Jun suddenly asked. At this time, Orgrim's expression froze. He really couldn't guarantee anything. "Huh, man," Jun snorted softly. Then, before Orgrim could speak, she continued, "That's enough. We have been together for too long, and you have made me a little tired. As the saying goes, distance to create beauty. We can keep some distance for now and meet again when we have the opportunity." "Orgrim, I am just a tool?" After Orgrim put on his clothes and washed himself, Jun was about to open the door and leave. But at this moment, Orgrim said, "Wait, it's the last day." As he finished speaking, he took out a glass of fresh milk from the freezer and placed it on the warhammer standing by the wall. Then, the warhammer suddenly became hot. Jun was stunned for a moment, then asked, "You were always like this before, hot milk? What else could be done?" Orgrim said matter-of-factly. After a moment, Orgrim handed the fresh milk to Jun and said, "I'm afraid you won't have the chance to drink it again for a long time. Cherish it." Jun glanced at Orgrim with a complicated look, took the fresh milk, and said softly, "Thank you. Sure enough, you guys have a lot of stock in your hands." A Sledgehammer Breaks into Pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 658. The warship slowly moored at the port of Avalon. In the port, many people looked at the warship and were extremely surprised. Where is Avalon? Dark Holy Land. The headquarters of the Warhammer Pirates. The largest pirate paradise in the New World. Here, theoretically speaking, it is impossible to see warships. However, ports are also different. The port where the warships are parked is the port dedicated to the Warhammer Pirates. Although people at the ordinary port can see the huge warship, they cannot see what is going on inside. After the warship was moored, Orgrim stood on the deck and looked down. Sure enough, when he emerged, he saw Hancock, Stussy, and Robin. Hancock also spotted him immediately, waving his arms happily at him, looking very excited. Jun just happened to walk up to Orgrim at this time and took a look outside. As a result, Hancock, who was very happy at first, immediately dissipated the excitement on his face after seeing Jun's figure, and became very gloomy and irritable. "Hateful, that bastard woman!" Hancock cursed in a low voice. Jun could feel the hostility from Hancock from a long distance away. He couldn't help but smiled and said, "It seems it's not just Stussy. Queen Stussy is not as emotional as Hancock, with all the joy, anger, sorrow, and joy shown on her face." Even when he saw Jun standing next to Orgrim, he still looked smiling, but there was something sharp in his eyes. Robin, on the other hand, looked very calm. After all, although she liked Orgrim in her heart, nothing really happened between them. And she always felt that Orgrim had always regarded her as a junior. Maybe it's because he was with Orgrim when he was a child. I don't know how to reverse this impression of Orgrim. Really don't want to go down anymore? Orgrim asked slightly hypocritically. Jun couldn't help but smile and said, "Then I really went down. Whatever happens, you are responsible." As soon as she finished speaking, Orgrim quickly waved his hands and said, "Oh, forget it, this kind of thing can't be done reluctantly." "Ha ha ha," man. Jun looked at Orgrim in a funny way. But she wasn't angry at all. She knew very well that after going down, it would most likely embarrass Orgrim. There was no need. She didn't want to do such a boring thing either. Things, you poor women, just follow Orgrim. I, Jun, want to stand in front of Orgrim, chase him, defeat him, and conquer him. I have no interest in following you. Competing for favor here. But why do I always feel a little sour when I think about this? Is it envy? Without thinking more, Jun put away all these thoughts in his heart. Farewell. Jun greeted Orgrim slightly coldly, and then turned around and walked towards the cabin. Orgrim nodded to Queen Stacy and others, then turned and left the edge of the deck. Hey, Jun, Orgrim called out. Hearing the sound, Jun stopped and turned around with a look of doubt. But when she turned around, Orgrim grabbed her arm and pulled her to in his arms. He kissed her very domineeringly. Before Jun could react, Orgrim had already finished the action, with an evil smile on his lips, and said after returning to the navy, "Don't give in to those rotten sweet potatoes. What chance do you have, even if you are a marine, even if we are on opposite sides? You, Jun, are my Orgrim woman. You are now and you can only be in the future. If you dare to bother, I will chase you to the ends of the earth. I'll kill those bastards too." Such a double standard. After Jun came back to his senses, he smiled and touched Orgrim's chin, jokingly. "Of course, aren't all pirates like this?" Orgrim laughed loudly. As soon as he finished speaking, he released his grip on Jun's arm, laughed and waved his hand at her. In the hateful eyes of the G-5 Navy, he was greatly surprised. Fang Fang walked off the warship. Jun looked at Orgrim's leaving figure, stretched out his hand to touch his lips, smiled one last time, and said to himself, "If someone could replace you, I would have chosen him long ago." That person. Why would we end up in this situation, Orgrim? Jun knew that there were many outstanding men in the navy, but no one could replace Orgrim's position in her heart. After coming back to her senses, Jun looked angrily at the young navy men around her. With a dark expression on his face, he said, "What are you looking at? Set sail and get out of this place." At the port, Orgrim was very cool just now, but now he feels guilty. Looking at Queen Stussy, Hancock, and Robin, Orgrim had a touch of flattery on his face. With a smile, he said, "Oh, we are all a family. Why are you so polite and come to the port to pick me up? It's really..." Hancock's emotions came and went quickly. After seeing Orgrim, he was full of joy. But before she could answer, Queen Stussy pulled her up and said with a smile on her face, "Oh, we are not here to pick you up. Originally, we thought there would be a new family joining, doesn't it seem like?" Orgrim said with a straight face, "What are you talking about? I went to Marijoa this time, but I went to talk about business. It will have a great impact on the future of our Warhammer pirates. Yes, by the way, where's Andre? Are you back? I have something to tell him." Her lady queen looked at the serious Orgrim with amusement. But she didn't pursue anything after all. She smiled and said, "I'm not back yet." Listening to the queen's voice, Orgrim knew that this incident was over. Sure enough, Stussy was still as doting on herself as ever, when she thought of this matter. Orgrim felt a little guilty and remorseful. "Alas, I didn't want to, but Jun is too big. I can't stand it. Lord Orgrim." Hancock excitedly hugged Orgrim's arm and said, "You haven't eaten yet, have you? I'm ready. Let's go back and try it. Lucci is well prepared and waiting for you to praise him in the courtyard." Robin followed with a smile. "Yeah? Let's go and have a look. I also miss Hancock's craftsmanship," Orgrim said with a smile. In the Golden City, in the gambling stall. The Sphinx's eyes were red, and he was betting crazily here. Opposite him, Fujitora smiled broadly. In front of his desk, there were a lot of the chips are neatly stacked in piles. And the denominations are very large. Yes, since the opening of the Golden City, Orgrim has returned to Avalon. Fujitora smiled, and this guy is still immersed in this in the world's #1 entertainment city. Here, he often competes with the Sphinx at the gambling table. But in the past 2 days, he seems to have been lucky. He has almost never lost, judging from the chips on the table now. He won at least 2 billion belly from the Sphinx. You know, this is a low-end gambling house, the bets in each round are limited, and the single win is not much. These 2 billion belly. It can be said that the Sphinx has been losing. Damn it, you rotten gambler, why are you so lucky? Is this cheating? After losing another round, the Sphinx slammed the table and complained. Fujitora smiled and gathered the chips in front of him, shook his head and said, I'm not that kind of vulgar person. I lost all my pocket money this quarter. Sphinx looked at the checkbook in his pocket and said a little irritably. Fujitora smiled. Quarterly pocket money? I thought I had won all your little treasury, but it turned out to be quarterly pocket money. Money. At this moment, the originally happy mood seemed to have become boring. His eyes rolled around, and the Sphinx asked mischievously, hey, you rotten gambler, you win everything, you've paid so much, why not give me some? If before the pocket money matter was exposed, Fujitora might have softened a bit and given some to Sphinx. But now, he is full of class hostility towards Sphinx, a rich Lolita. Therefore, Fujitora smiled and shook his head without hesitation. No. Hey, what a stingy man. The Sphinx didn't bother with anything. After complaining, he touched his chin again and said to himself, it's time to go back to Avalon. Go back and flatter Mr. Hammer. He is in a good mood and said, maybe you can give me a little more pocket money. At the same time, the phone bug carried by Fujitora Isho also rang. Fujitora Isho was stunned for a moment, then answered the phone and said, it's me, Mr. Jun. One smile, you've had enough fun, right? Jun asked with a smile on the phone. I won almost 2 billion from Lord Sphinx, Fujitora said with a smile. When Jun heard this, he immediately became happy and said, good job, I have long disliked that bastard Loli. Then, she paused for a moment and continued, go back to G-5, stop playing. After I arrive, let's go back to Marineford. Fujitora smiled and was stunned for a moment, then asked, did the headquarters have any tasks assigned? No, it's the marshal boss who just called you to see you. He wants to consult with you on some matters, Jun smiled and said. Although he was curious in his heart, there were many people here, and Fujitora smiled and didn't ask any more questions. Fujitora smiled and nodded and said, yes, I understand, I will do it now. Return to G-5. After hanging up and putting away the phone, Fujitora looked at the Sphinx with a smile and said, that's it, Sir Sphinx. Next time we are destined, let's decide the winner. Are you leaving? The Sphinx asked. Well, there are some things to deal with. Fujitora smiled and said softly. I won't let you be so relaxed next time. I'm going back to Avalon too. Farewell. The Sphinx stood up from the chair, smiled at Fujitora and waved, then turned around and left very neatly. After exchanging the chips for a money order from Avalon Dark Bank, Fujitora left in a very happy mood. Gambling house, walked towards the port. Yes, among the G-5 Navy, there are many navies using Avalon Dark Bank. After all, the G-5 Navy is extremely special, and the world government will not issue them salaries. Everything is self-sufficient in the New World, so they are considered outside the world government settlement financial system. And the Avalon Dark Bank has huge influence in the New World. Therefore, naturally, G-5 the Navy also uses this bank. Even the small treasury in Jun is stored in the Dark Bank. Marshal of the Warring States period, what do you want to discuss with me? Could it be that they want me to be transferred back to the headquarters? Fujitora thought a little strangely with a smile. But it is impossible to return to the headquarters. G-5 people are nice to talk to and all of them are talented people. When I come back here, I feel like I am at home. How can I be willing to leave? In particular, I heard that Giordano recently intended to be transferred back to the headquarters. In this way, I may become the next commander of G-5, and my life will be more relaxed. Why are you going back to headquarters? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 659. More than half a month has passed since Orgrim returned to Avalon. Here at the port, another ship is welcomed. It's Neiman's boat. The tired and dressed was standing on the deck at this time, looking at the bustling port of Avalon, and couldn't help but said, "I'm finally back." Sure enough, no matter what is happening outside, Avalon will always be the best place. As soon as he finished speaking, his brain collapsed. Neiman reached out and knocked on his head, and asked with a smile, "What? Is this your speech about going to sea? From what you say, when you come back, you are not ready. Leaving." Andrest rubbed his head and said, dissatisfied, "Auntie, please give me some face, okay? I am also about to become a captain." "Ha ha ha ha, you little guy, even if you become the captain, you are still our junior." Neiman laughed. After a pause, Andrest asked excitedly, seriously, "And, did my father allow me to go to sea alone, form your own pirate group?" "Of course, he originally planned to let you go to sea, but at that time, the sea was not very calm. Now the situation seems to be clear. You performed well during this experience, so he agreed. However, it seems that there are some requirements." Neiman smiled and said. "Any request?" Andrest asked quickly. "I don't know for sure. You can ask it yourself when you meet him." Neiman waved her hand and said. At this time, Trafalgar Law also came out and looked at the brightly lit Avalon, filled with emotions in his heart. Many years ago, when he was still a kid, when he crawled out of the hell in Provence. He met Doflamingo with the purpose of meeting Orgrim. But in the end, he was delayed by many things. In the end, he left the New World without. I could come to Avalon once, but I couldn't come to see Orgrim once. On the contrary, it was on Mignon Island that I met the most evil and powerful pirate in the world for the first and last time. I thought that maybe I would never see Orgrim or Doflamingo again in my life. But, things turn out differently. I was in the North Sea and got into a fight with Lord Orgrim's son Andrest for no apparent reason. Now he has become Andrest's partner inexplicably. In this way, meeting Lord Orgrim and meeting the young master is simply a matter of course. I have long heard that Avalon is extremely prosperous and is the richest and most powerful island in the New World. When I saw it today, it really lived up to its reputation," Trafalgar Law said softly. As soon as he finished speaking, the ship moored steadily into the port. Andrest patted Trafalgar Law on the shoulder and said, "Stop talking nonsense here. Let's go. I'll take you to the island. Don't you want to see me, father? And Dr. Nightingale?" I have inquired. "Dr. Nightingale happens to be on the island these days. What are you in such a hurry for?" Trafalgar Law said with a smile. "My friends are all on the island, although I have never met two of them. This time, I will gather them and get ready for everyone to go to sea together," Andrest said slightly excitedly. Neiman and Andrest were familiar with the road in Avalon, and they didn't need anyone to pick them up. Trafalgar Law followed them all the way through the bustling streets. After experiencing various scenes in the streets of Avalon, I finally came to the headquarters of the Warhammer Pirates. Unlike Morgan's had a unique vision, so he could see the low-key and extreme luxury here. But Trafalgar Law did not have this kind of vision. His country was transformed when he was young, and he became the only refugee survivor. Although he was taken by Doflamingo for a period of time, during that time, he did not what kind of appreciation level should be cultivated. After that, he was even driven away and lived alone in Bihai. He had no concept of these buildings, beauty, luxury, and so on. He felt very strange when walking among this huge palace complex. Rough, powerful, beautiful, and seems to be very valuable. As for the rest, I'm sorry, I can't feel it. He led Trafalgar Law all the way to the gate of Orgrim's courtyard, and Andres said, "This is where my father usually lives? He should be in there now. Come on, I will take you to see him." Trafalgar Law felt a little excited and excited. "I wonder what it will be like to see Lord Orgrim again?" Andres smiled, then pushed hard and pushed the door open. Before I could turn my head, I heard exclamations coming from inside. "Get out of the way." The voice sounded familiar, but before anyone could see it clearly, Andres felt a pain in his chest. His feet slipped, and his whole body was knocked out like a cannonball. It hit the door directly in front of him. On the wall, half of the body was sunk in. Cough, Andres spat out a mouthful of old blood. This feeling, there is no need to look at it at all. "Runty," Andres shouted loudly. Trafalgar Law was stunned at this time. He had always kept his gaze in front, so he naturally saw everything. She seemed to be a beautiful girl, and she couldn't stop. He stopped and hit Andres in the chest, knocking Andres away. "What kind of monsters are these?" Sorry, Andre, you're back," Runty said, a little embarrassed. But even though Andres was knocked to the point of vomiting blood, he was knocked into the wall. But Runty didn't seem to be worried about Andres' injury at all. It seemed that this was not the first time that this happened. "Your Highness. Are you okay?" Peggy Wan quickly ran over and supported Andres. Andres vomited out another mouthful of blood, and then he felt his chest relaxed a lot. He gritted his teeth and said, "Sooner or later, I will have to. A decisive battle broke out with your sister." "Ha ha 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 ha, Andre, are you back?" Yamato held a mace in his hand, walked from the yard to the door, looked at the embarrassed Andres, and said hello with a smile. The moment he saw Yamato, Andres immediately he straightened his waist, patted his chest, and pretended that there was no problem at all and said, "Well, I just came back. Why are you all here?" "Because I heard that you are coming back and bringing new partners with you, so everyone is waiting for you here," Yamato said with a smile. "Ah, yes, new partner." Only then did Andres react and quickly pointed to Trafalgar Law and said, "Now, this is Trafalgar Law, the ship's doctor I found in the North Sea. This is Dr. Nightingale. Where are the disciples?" Trafalgar Law quickly waved his hands and said, "Don't talk about disciples. I just received some favors from Dr. Nightingale. How dare I call myself a disciple? Please take good care of me in the future," Yamato said very generously. Runty and Peguin also said hello to Trafalgar Law. Then Runty quickly said, "Come in quickly, Nami and Ace are here today too. If it weren't for you, I would have gone in long ago." Andres glared at Runty angrily. Runty curled her lips and pretended not to hear. The next second, she lay on Peggy Wan's back and shouted, "Xiao Pei, Andre bullied me, let's work together to deal with him." "I don't want it, I can't beat it." Peggy Wan refused without hesitation. "How is it possible? We, siblings, join forces and we are invincible," Runty said excitedly. But Andres ignored these two living treasures and walked into the courtyard with Trafalgar Law. The courtyard was very big. As soon as he entered, he saw the father was talking to an unknown boy. Next to the father, there was a little beauty with long orange hair. This should be the genius navigator and the legendary dishwashing master, right? Natural types who think they are invincible are often short-lived ghosts. Don't think that eating the shasheo fruit will make you more powerful. To become a truly strong person, you need more than just ability. In terms of skills and dominance, you also have to put in a lot of effort. Orgrim patted Ace on the shoulder and said, "How do you feel about domineering? Although I have awakened and mastered some of it, it is always very unfamiliar to me." Ace humbly asked for advice. "Gee ha 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 ha, domineering and domineering, the key is chi. To master this chi, you must control your own heart. Go down and experience it for yourself. I don't think it makes much sense what others say. This thing is more like an instinct, just like breathing." Orgrim laughed and said. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned his head and looked to the other side. Andrest was walking towards him. Beside him, there was also a familiar yet unfamiliar figure, Trafalgar Law. "It's not a long time since I last saw Andrest, almost a year, right? This is really not a long time for people who make a living on the sea." However, compared with Andrest before he went to sea, Orgrim vaguely saw some mature atmosphere in his son, the feeling of a man at sea. "Came back?" Orgrim smiled and said. Andrest was a little excited and nodded. "I'm back, father. From what Niemann said, you are doing pretty well." "Where is Niemann?" Orgrim reached out and rubbed Andrest's head, and asked softly. "Auntie went to see second uncle." Andrest smiled and said. "What? After coming back, instead of coming to see me as the eldest brother, she went to find her second brother, sadly." Orgrim joked with a smile. Then, he looked at Trafalgar Law. After a pause, he said to Andrest, "This is Ace, and this is Nama, let's get acquainted with each other, and we'll be partners from now on." Then, before Andreas could speak, Orgrim said, "Trafalgar Law, I really didn't expect that things would develop like this. It seems that the fate between your boy and us has not come to an end yet." Trafalgar Law also spoke excitedly at this time. "Lord Orgrim, gee ha 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 ha, no need to say more, these are all choices made by fate, do your best, that guy Dover, I will intercede for you." Orgrim laughed and waved his hands. Trafalgar Law nodded seriously and said, "Yes, Lord Orgrim, I will become an excellent pirate." At this moment, the door of the house was also opened, and Stussy ran out excitedly. After seeing Andrest, her eyes turned red and she said, "Andrest." Andrest, who was talking to Ace and Nami, suddenly turned his head and shouted happily, "Mom." At the same time, outside the gate, Plank's figure walked in and said with a smile, "Our little highness is back, tisk tisk, double happiness is coming." Orgrim smiled and said, "What's the joy?" "Enel has arrived in the East China Sea and found the subjugated princess of Alabasta." Glank responded with a smile. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 660. East China Sea, Sea Restaurant Party. At this time, Enel was sitting in a corner of the restaurant. On the table in front of him were some lobsters and other delicacies. But it seemed that Enelu didn't have much appetite and almost never moved. Today's Enel does not look as flamboyant as he did in the New World. He has a strong pirate aura and likes to wear his upper body naked after learning from Orgrim. At this time, he was wearing a fancy beach shirt and big shorts. He didn't carry any weapons or anything like that. He also had a pair of sunglasses on the bridge of his nose. It looks like someone who was vacationing in the East China Sea accidentally came to Baradi. Even the people in the restaurant didn't recognize him. This person sitting quietly in the corner is none other than the famous pirate in the New World, the leader of the Warhammer pirates, Thunderous Enel. I reached out and peeled off the lobster shell, and the sauce inside brought out the fragrance of food. This seemed to whet Enelu's appetite a little. At this moment, a beautiful girl with long sea blue hair, wearing a waiter's outfit, carrying a bottle of red wine, walked to the table of Enelu, put down the wine glass, and said softly, "This guest, the drinks you ordered have arrived." After finishing speaking, the beautiful girl poured the red wine from the bottle into the wine glass with very skillful movements. Enelu didn't look at the red wine, but looked at the girl. Nefertali Vivi. The subjugated princess of Alabasta, the last bloodline of the Nefertali clan among the 20 former kings. He looks very young, about the same size as his little highness, right? It is hard to imagine that this girl with a gentle smile on her face is burdened with the hatred of her country and her family. It is also hard to imagine that Her Royal Highness the Princess of the Nefertali clan, who grew up with a silver spoon in her mouth, could perfectly serve as a waiter serving diners here. I seem to have seen you somewhere, Enelu said softly. The movements of Wai Wei's hands were slightly stiff, and the wine almost overflowed from the glass. How come, I have no impression of you at all, guessed Wai Wei pretended to be relaxed and said. Maybe I made a mistake. After all, that country has long been changed beyond recognition, the oldest country of mankind, Enelu chuckled lightly. Wai Wei's expression changed slightly, but soon returned to normal, and said with a smile, I have also heard the stories there. It seems that the country has been moved to the New World. I really don't know what's going on over there now. War continues, and many pirates in the New World often attack there. The purpose seems to be to defeat the new king of Alabasta, Sand Crocodile, however, they all failed. Recently, Crocodile seems to be called the pirate emperor of the New World, that is, the Yonko, as the saying goes, the 4 great pirates standing on the top of the pirate hierarchy, Enelu said softly. It was as if he was chatting with Wai Wei and casually chatting about any topic that interested her. A trace of undetectable hatred flashed in Wai Wei's eyes. Crocodile. He was once the national hero of Alabasta, and his father trusted him so much, but in the end, he betrayed his father's trust. Alabasta was also taken away. Wai Wei knew very well that someone was looking for her, and if nothing else happened, it should be Crocodile's subordinates. That guy Crocodile is definitely a ruthless person, and he won't hesitate at all to do things like eradicating the grass and roots. He is the last bloodline of the Nefertali clan and the orthodox royal family of Alabasta. The world government did not recognize Crocodile's legitimate rule over Alabasta. Therefore, Crocodile must be determined to kill him quickly. At the same time, why didn't she want to kill Crocodile? Retake Alabasta and rescue the people held hostage by Crocodile. Uncover Crocodile's conspiracy and clear away the stigma Crocodile imposed on them, the Nefertali clan. Her father is not the fool King Crocodile calls him. Therefore, she must live, escape from Crocodile's pursuit, and then become strong, find partners and strength that can help her, cross the East Sea, pass through the first half of the Grand Route, and enter the New World. Return to Alabasta and find Crocodile. Face him, challenge him, defeat him, and then, in revenge, kill him. But all of this seemed too difficult. Just escaping for her life on this vast sea was already very difficult, especially for a young princess like her who was once ignorant of the world. It was really too difficult. And Crocodile, who is flourishing in the New World, will soon become the new pirate emperor, standing at the top of the New World. Is it really possible for him to be defeated like this? Can I really take revenge? That's really tragic, the citizens of that country, Wai Wei responded softly. Well, that's really tragic. Enelu picked up the wine glass and took a sip. At this moment, an unhappy voice came from afar. This guest, please don't strike up a conversation with our clerk, okay? Mr. Sanji, you misunderstood. Wai Wei's face turned red. However, Wai Wei would not have a good impression of a person like Enelu who looked sleazy in his clothing. It was just the mention of Alabasta that brought back her memories. At the same time, I was a little wary, testing Enelu to see if he was Crocodile's pursuer. How can there be such a thing as striking up a conversation? Yes, the man who disrupted the situation was none other than Vinsmoke Sanji. His Royal Highness the Prince of the Germa clan. Sanji always felt that the person in front of him looked familiar, as if he had seen him somewhere. But I just can't remember it. In fact, he had actually met him. When he was young, Enel had gone to the kingdom of Germa and had a chance encounter with him. But that was many years ago, and Sanji wouldn't remember it too clearly. He didn't have any ill intentions, he just thought that Wei, a new colleague who had just arrived, was being harassed by this customer who seemed to be a nasty person. Therefore, out of his knightly and gentlemanly spirit, he came out to relieve the siege. However, at this time, it seemed that he had misunderstood something. Sanji was not a messy person. After hearing Wei's explanation, he quickly said, "I'm sorry, I misunderstood." Enelu waved his hand and said very calmly, "Don't worry, but, I think you look familiar too, you, unique eyebrows." Sanji was shocked, but on the surface he said very calmly, "I have no impression of you as a guest at all. Could it be that you admitted your mistake, guest?" "Maybe," Enela grinned and said with a smile. He wouldn't admit it? The kingdom of Germa, the prince of the Vinsmoke family. Vinsmoke Sanji. But this has nothing to do with him. The Warhammer pirates have a good relationship with the kingdom of Germa, and even Sanji's sister Reiju and Lord Beckman have a good relationship. Maybe something may happen in the future. But at least now, Germa and the Vinsmoke clan don't pay too much attention to Prince Sanji, who once escaped. He, Enelu, naturally had no interest in meddling in other people's affairs. It is enough to know that this Vinsmoke Sanji is hiding in the East China Sea, in this sea restaurant Baratili. Maybe it will be useful in the future? He didn't hold on to her any longer and chatted about anything. Enelu knew very well that he didn't need to do so much, he just had to watch. It is enough not to let Her Royal Highness the Princess be caught or abducted. After all, it seems that this princess is quite useful to Lord Orgrim. A few days ago, he had already found this princess. But today, it was just a formal contact. Previously, Enelu also thought that Her Royal Highness the Princess would be arrogant or something. But now, it seems not. The princess of the subjugated country knows how to survive. Without thinking too much, Enel was drinking red wine and eating lobster, looking very calm. "It seems to taste pretty good. Is this a treasure I discovered?" "See Restaurant Barty," a smile appeared on Enelu's lips, and he whispered to himself. "If you simply treat this mission as a vacation, it seems quite wonderful. The only pity is that there seems to be no company to accompany me. It would be fun if we brought that kid Lucci, right?" As soon as this idea came up, a trace of panic appeared on Enelu's face, and he said to himself, "How can I think like this? Generally speaking, if you go on vacation like me, you have to take a beautiful lady with you, right?" Enelu, who was feeling slightly frightened, decided to stay away from Lucci after returning. "At least until you find the girlfriend you like, stay away from that single guy. The boat of friendship can capsize easily." At this moment, the door of the restaurant was pushed open, and then a beautiful girl walked in. "Female swordsman? It's really rare." Enelu looked at it casually and didn't pay too much attention. Then, another figure followed behind the female swordsman. He is also a swordsman, but compared to the female swordsman, this man looks a little strange. He has 3 swords hanging on his waist and has green hair. "Zoro, follow me closely, don't get lost," the female swordsman said without looking back. "Who would get lost in a place like this?" "Don't underestimate me, Gina," Zoran responded unhappily. "Yes, these two are Kuina and Rorano Zoro from Frost Moon Village in the East China Sea. If Orgrim is here, he will definitely be surprised. Kuina, is he really not dead? Even if he has never visited Kao's hero, this girl still got rid of her miserable fate. She has grown into a graceful and beautiful swordsman. As for Zoro, this guy has a tough life. Unfortunately, even the demon sword could not be defeated. Orgrim never thought that he would die casually. The white word Hideo was not hanging on Sauron's waist, but was held by Gina. As for Sauron, Takashi, he also has a good sword in his hand. Not long ago, he got the demon sword, the third generation of ghost sword. The other two are just ordinary. It's a pirate hunter, that three-sword style Rorono Zoro, and the strongest swordsman in the East China Sea, Kuina. The people in the restaurant looked at the figures of Sauron and Kuina with some surprise. Enelu didn't know Sauron and Kuina, but listening to the voices around them, it seemed that these two guys were celebrities in the East China Sea. Pirate hunter, bounty hunter? This is really a profession that has been lost for a long time. After all, there are no powerful bounty hunters in the New World. The New World is the new world of pirates. When hunters get there, they will also become the prey of pirates. Mito Stream, the strongest swordsman in the East China Sea, interesting, but he is also a frog in the well. Enelu thought a little funny in his heart. But as a quality pirate, Enelu had no intention of ridiculing others. On the contrary, he quite admired these people. When they left the weakest sea, what kind of brilliance will the East China Sea burst into after encountering a powerful enemy that has never been imagined? Enel was not attracted. But Wai Wei, the subjugated princess, was attracted. The title "the strongest swordsman in the East China Sea" makes Wai Wei's heart a little hot. A swordsman with such a title must be extremely powerful, right? Such a swordsman might be able to defeat Crocodile, right? Bounty hunter words, if you hire them yourself. It has to be said that even though Wai Wei seems to have a very mature mind at this time, her vision is still too small. It was previously at the entrance to the second half of the Grand Route, but now it has wandered into the East China Sea. She simply couldn't understand what it was to be powerful. She also couldn't feel how powerful Crocodile was. Cognition is so superficial.